There are many challenges facing Australia and the Australian economy, but also substantial opportunities. And I look forward to hearing from Peter Dutton on how an alternative coalition government would approach many of the big issues ahead and his vision for the future of our nation. We've already heard this morning on the importance of being on the front foot for the challenges ahead, seizing the opportunities available and improving our productivity. We've also been looking at the big infrastructure challenges facing Australia and the need for strategy, prioritisation and coordination between the Commonwealth and states and territories. And we've also heard about the challenges, but importantly the opportunities on decarbonisation and climate adaptation. And later today, we'll continue the conversations on innovation and dynamic capabilities, cybersecurity and ESG. I look forward to hearing Mr Dutton's perspectives on these and many other issues that are shaping the future of Australia. After Mr Dutton has made his opening address, we will be taking questions from the audience, so please start popping them in Pigeonhole now. Now I'd like to welcome to the stage the Honourable Peter Dutton, Leader of the Opposition.
The opposition I'm leading is acting in that constructive spirit. Consider the following. In the budget in October, we supported several measures: extending access to childcare, lowering the costs of medicines, initiatives to combat domestic violence and flood recovery, to name a few. In Labor's most recent budget, we supported several measures: increasing the bulk billing incentives, expanding the parenting payment, and the additional investment in women's safety, to again name just a few. As an opposition, we've sought to work constructively with the government on the petroleum resource rent tax. We're concerned about the negative effects of such a tax in terms of Labor's legislative amendments to strengthen the social safety net. Here too, we've found much common ground and sought to compromise. We support expanding eligibility for assistance for single parents, and we support seeing more elderly Australians entitled to a higher rate of job seeker. We questioned an increase in the base of the job seeker rate at a time when we've got 438,000 job vacancies and 840,000 people on unemployment benefits. And instead, we propose that those on unemployment benefits are able to earn more through part-time work before their job seeker allowance is affected, increasing participation, particularly in a tight labour market. We should always incentivise the support that we wrap around people to move off welfare into work. And when it comes to foreign affairs and national security, we've also found much common ground with the government. We've commended the government for its work in the Pacific, and we've provided bipartisan support to the government in carrying forward the AUKUS security deal and the defence agenda established under the coalition in government. In fact, there's one figure that I want to draw to your attention today, and it's the fact that we've supported 70 pieces of legislation in this parliament already. We want to be an opposition which seeks to even more. Now, $20 extra might not seem much to many of us in this audience. We're in a fortunate position. But over the year, it's more than $1,000 for that family. And they've only just got bad decisions to make from there. Should they reduce the items in their trolley or go without to keep their budget at $200? Should they spend more than what they'd budgeted and try and find the savings elsewhere? Should they try and turn off the heater or put off a decision to provide support to their kids? These are the choices that many Australians are making today. And inflation is squeezing Australians on multiple financial fronts, from the petrol bowser to insurance premiums, from power bills to mortgage repayments. A typical family we know with a mortgage of $750,000 is now paying an additional $22,000 a year in after-tax payments. So the ability to find savings becomes even more difficult as inflation pinches harder on all fronts. Like months across the current and previous financial years show that the number of businesses which have gone into insolvency is up in every case. The point I want to press home is that our inflation woes in good part are coming from Canberra. As I said, Australia's core inflation rate is higher than the United States, higher than Canada, higher than Japan and higher than the euro area. And that speaks volumes about domestic factors influencing inflation. Instead of the government lowering inflation, it's fuelling the fire of inflation by making bad decisions and avoiding others. In July, power prices increase by up to 29% on top of significant increases already. The government's plan to roll out 28,000 kilometres of transmission wires by 2050 means that $100 billion of sunk cost will have to be passed on to consumers and small businesses. And as Energy Australia's Managing Director Mark Collette noted, the transmission is expensive with the potential for overruns. He went on to say that doing things as efficiently as possible to keep these costs down is the main game to play for at the moment to minimise the damage. Now, it's a scientific reality that whatever percentage of renewables are in the system, and it's a great thing, we want to see an increased number of renewables in the system, but they still need to be firmed up. Nuclear energy, in the form of small modular zero-emission energy, is the only feasible firming option if we want clean, consistent and cost-effective power. We want to make sure that we can help families get through a cost of living crisis. Thank you again to CEDA for the work that you do to contribute to our national debate on so many issues. I've been involved with CEDA over the last couple of decades, and they are meaningful engagements, and I hope that that can continue. I'm sure it can. I look forward to questions now. Thank you very much.
Some of those housing challenges and how that flows through the cost of living and inflation as well.
Well, Cass, it's the question of our time in a sense, and it's one of those great frustrations between the three levels of government to try and land significant policy that can shift the dial. There's a lot of frustration felt when you meet with local council leaders about their frustration and lack of preparedness because they don't have the support for infrastructure investment. They're working in large part under state government legislation, which means that over the course of the last decade or two, it's made it more difficult, not less, to develop land. There's obviously a very significant impact given the lag from COVID and the bring forward of building activity, which we presided over through significant incentive in the market. The impact of supply chain pressures on builders and the number of builders that have gone broke, the number that look like they might suffer the same fate, regrettably. I think all of that has come together as a perfect storm. And the Prime Minister, at the start of his period in government, was able to convene a meeting, I think, in this very hall around employment, and there was criticism coming out of that. But I do think there is a significant opportunity for the government, for the federal government, to provide leadership now around working with the other two levels of government to establish where there can be some quick wins. We have a significant amount of urban sprawl without the requisite infrastructure to go with it, and it's the point I make about planning to bring in 1.5 million people over 5 years to put pressure on what is already there in the system. There is a significant discussion to be had about density within capital cities, but I can tell you, once you get into the outer ring, most members of parliament here, I think, would convey a similar message. There is very little appetite for significant and higher density in outer metropolitan areas where limits might now be 2-storey houses or 3- or 4-storey apartment blocks.
Around nuclear power, and how would you propose, cutting through some of that community opposition, which is pretty strong?
Well, I can see a few faces in the audience who I suspect are sort of devoted Q&A watchers. I'm not. I've gone off Q&A the last couple of years, but there was an interesting poll on Q&A the other night, which you might have seen, that had something like 63% of people polled on the night, 16,000 votes. They were in favour of nuclear energy, and it's quite interesting when you look at the qualitative as well as the quantitative work on nuclear energy. We don't have the domestic industry in our country as they would have in Canada or in France or the United States, wherever it might be. So we're starting off a lower base, but I do think the decision, which is a bipartisan one, to purchase the nuclear-powered submarines from the Brits and from the Americans, I think that has shifted the public debate. I think a lot of younger people, and again this comes through in the qualitative work, are more informed than people of my generation. My generation is influenced by the tragedies that have taken place, particularly in the 60s or 70s or 80s, and they're influenced by The Simpsons. And this is a reality. So we are starting off a lower base. They don't want a Springfield near their house, fair enough. No one's proposing a Springfield near their house. But the small modular reactor technology now can firm up renewables, because if we get to 80% or 90% renewables, you're still going to have a fixed cost and a need to firm up through the period where you've got a disruption. And if you speak to the energy companies, they want a couple of weeks of constant supply because they've got, if there's a breakdown, if there is a fault in generation or distribution, if there's an extended weather event, some other catastrophic event, then people will not go without power. And it will change the dynamic very quickly in our country. If we do experience blackouts, as they're predicting at the moment, people will take a very dour view, particularly in terms of the pressure that they're under financially at the moment. If there's not a consistency in their business, manufacturing, we were in South Australia the other day, a business there has a 3-time cost of their energy compared to their sister plant in Malaysia. Strategy at the moment is not to provide the detail. And I honestly believe in conversations I've had with Indigenous leaders, with other Australians around the country, and the research that I've seen on it, the single biggest hesitation and the reason that the numbers are going south now is because people, if they're a soft yes or a soft no, will not have their query answered. And that is a very significant stumbling block. And if the view continues that this is the pathway, then I believe it will set back reconciliation. And I think that's why the onus is on the Prime Minister at the moment to come together for a unifying moment, which is constitutional recognition. And as I say, I think you'd get 80 or 90% public support for that, and that would unite our country. And then you could have the discussion about the voice subsequent to that. But at the moment, I think the government is putting the cart before the horse, and Australians understand that putting a new chapter into the Constitution is a very, very significant undertaking. And for that reason, I think there will continue to be hesitation, particularly when a deliberate design feature is to keep the information and the design feature from the public before they vote.